John, and I will be your host. Today's topic is dealing with disappointment. Why should we talk about disappointment? Surely that is something that everyone goes through and it's a part of life, and we just need to learn to suck it up. Well, the truth is that disappointment for many people is a precursor to depression, to anxiety, to hopelessness, and in extreme cases, sometimes giving up on life. Continued disappointment, continued dashed hopes, continued failure can really cause a lot of disillusionment for some people. And yes, it may be true that disappointment may be a part of life. It may be something that we need to get used to, something that we need to work on. That is the whole secret. The fact that it is something that we need to work on, it is something that we need to learn to deal with. So we're going to look at some practical steps that we can apply in order to deal with disappointment, in order to process disappointment, and in order to move on from a place of disappointment. We're going to start off by looking what disappointment is, what the essence of disappointment is, and we're going to look at the Oxford Dictionary. Disappointment is sadness or displeasure caused by the non-fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations. And that's the essence, the non-fulfillment of hopes. What I thought would happen didn't happen. What I was hoping for didn't transpire, and it left me with feelings of sadness or displeasure. And those feelings can be very intense, especially if it was something that I was really looking forward to. It may have been something that I really needed, that would have brought about a major difference in my life, and that didn't transpire. So it leaves me with these deep feelings of disappointment, deep feelings of sadness, deep feelings of displeasure. What are some of the symptoms of disappointment? Depression, apathy, denial, anger, or fear. Depression, especially if I maybe go through a series of disappointments. There were a number of situations where my hopes were dashed, where things did not work out the way that I was hoping to. And that could cause a feeling of depression, deep sadness, where I may be inclined to spiral into a dark place of hopelessness and helplessness. In other cases, apathy, where I've got to the place where I just don't care anymore, I'm giving up. What's the point? And that could be a dangerous place as well, where I could then start to lose hope. When I've got to the place of giving up, where I'm no longer willing to try, where I'm no longer willing to put any effort or any energy into something. Denial, where I'm not willing to face up, where I'm not willing to own up, where I'm not willing to show up. And that's the essence of denial, where I no longer take any personal responsibility. I may be inclined to project, I may be inclined to blame, I may be inclined to look for external reasons why I continue experiencing disappointment. Anger is normally the result of feelings of imposition. Something has been forced onto me. I'm experiencing some violation. I'm no longer able to make my own choices, my own decisions. My self-determination is being affected, and that is what causes feeling of anger, which could ultimately spiral into feelings of rage. And then fear, insecurity, uncertainty. I don't know what to expect anymore. Is it worthwhile even trying? I don't know what to think anymore. And I begin to feel very insecure in myself. I get to feel very insecure in my place in the world, for that matter. And those are all potential symptoms of disappointment. What are some of the causes of disappointment? And this is where I'm going to veer off from the regular kind of thinking. I would say the first idea that comes to mind when I think of causes of disappointment would be the unmet expectations, the things that went wrong. the hopes and dreams that were dashed. And I'm going to say, no, those are not the causes of disappointment. Those are the byproducts of disappointment. Those are situations that I experience. The actual causes of disappointment actually go much deeper. They are more internally based. Disappointment very often is experienced because I compare. I compare myself with others. I compare what I have with others. I compare my experiences with the experiences of others. And I may see that other people are luckier. Other people seem to have more. Other people may seem to experience more success than I do. And the moment I start to make those comparisons, I am then more inclined to experience disappointment, disillusionment, sadness, because my situation may not be as positive and as good as other people's situations. And I may feel that other people are lucky and I'm not, and other people get and I don't. And that is what causes feelings of disappointment. Impatience, I may be wanting things to happen overnight. I may be wanting things to rush into materialization or manifestation. I'm not willing to give it the time that may be necessary. I'm not willing to walk the journey that I may need to walk. I'm not willing to spend time into growing to become equal to my aspirations. And that feeling of impatience may create feelings of disappointment. There may be self-doubt. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I'm not able to accomplish because I don't know enough. I'm not educated enough. I don't have the right skills. And that self-doubt can have a major impact on my sense of self-worth, my sense of significance. And that in turn may lead to feelings of disappointment and disillusionment and sadness. Identification, I am worthless, I am stupid, I am a failure. Nothing ever works out for me. When I identify with a situation instead of remaining objective, these are feelings, these are experiences, I use the word I am, and that can be very, very negative in creating more and more negative experiences and continue to cause me to experience more disappointment, disillusionment, and sadness. I may be attached to the outcomes. Come hell or high water, I want things to work out that particular way. And when it doesn't, I may feel a sense of failure. I may feel a sense of worthlessness because things didn't work out for me the way that I was hoping to, that I was planning on. And that attachment to the outcomes may cause feelings of disappointment. Now, the question may arise, why is it wrong for me to be attached to the outcomes? If I have a goal, surely that is what I want to accomplish. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It is not so much the actual outcomes that I desire as much as I want to experience the feeling of achieving the outcomes. And we're going to look a bit later on what the actual correct way is of going about it, as opposed to remaining attached and focused and fixed to a specific outcome. How I can become broader to focusing on the experience that I want to have, and that may open up a greater perspective for me, as opposed to having a narrow focus, limited focus on remaining attached to outcomes that may cause feelings of disappointment should that not materialize in the way that I was hoping for it to materialize. Like with every other experience, the primary cause is my story. What does that mean? It is not the situation in itself that causes me stress or sadness or disappointment or anger or pain. It is the meaning that I give to the situation. It is my internal narrative. It is the story that I tell myself in response to what it is that I experience. My experience of a situation is always the result of my emotions and feelings that I have. And those emotions and feelings are always the result of my nervous system responding biochemically and bioelectrically to a situation. And that is the result of the meaning that I give to the situation, the story that I tell myself about what it is that is happening. And in coaching terms, we refer to that as the meaning-making and feeling-making process. My narrative, my story, my interpretation, my internal representation of what happens stimulates my nervous system to release a whole range of biochemicals and neurochemicals that ultimately create my feelings and my experience. And it could be positive, depending on the positive quality of my story, or it could be negative, depending on the negative quality of my story. Imperative to understand that my nervous system does not respond to external factors, it only responds to internal factors, to the meaning-making process, the story that I tell myself, that creates the emotions or the feelings that ultimately create my experience. There's something that is referred to as the thought cycle. There is a specific cycle that my thoughts follow that ultimately create my experience. And let's use an example. We start off with my thought. And by the way, before the thought, there is some external event, there is some situation, there is some circumstance that happens, something happens, somebody does something, and I have a thought in response to the situation that happens. There is a story that I'm telling myself. So talking about disappointment in this particular context, something may go wrong, something may not materialize. It is something that I experience or interpret as a negative event. So my story may be, I'm a failure, I'll be alone for the rest of my life. It may be the result of a relationship that didn't work out. So immediately there is this story, this negative story that I tell myself, this negative, unresourceful, disempowering narrative that I have in response to the situation. That in turn will trigger my nervous system to release a range of stress hormones, and I feel the emotions of sadness. I have the feelings of hopelessness, of disappointment. And that in turn causes physical sensations because my body responds to those emotions. And it may even go as far as chest pain, fatigue, exhaustion, should it continue, because I continue to remain stuck in this negative story. And there is an ongoing release of stress hormones. There is a deepening of the negative emotions. And over time, my body reacts to it chemically and electrically, and I experience these physical sensations. And that in turn leads to my behavior. There's excessive crime, there's social isolation. I distance myself from people because my trust has been affected. And that creates the consequence or the outcomes. I miss time with friends and family, and it creates a negative situation for me. And that in turn feeds back into my thinking, and I keep the cycle going. So I continue to unconsciously look for reasons to confirm my negative thinking. And as I said, I perpetuate the cycle, and I create more and more of this negative experience, of this feeling of disappointment. And an interesting fact to bear in mind is that my thoughts carry an electrical charge or electrical energy that radiates out into the external environment, and the associated emotions carry a magnetic force or a magnetic energy that attract from the environment. So I am unconsciously looking for reasons to blame, for reasons to confirm that nothing ever works out to me, that my disappointment is justified. And the emotions that I feel have a magnetic energy that will attract situations and people and circumstances from the environment to continue playing that role for me of negativity, negative experiences that will reinforce the feelings of disappointment, and the cycle keeps going. How do I interrupt that cycle? I can't do much about the external event. I can't even do much about my emotions, because my emotions are the result of stress hormones that have been released into my system, into my bloodstream, that create the feelings. And I can't really do much about the physical sensations or the behaviors, because they're all byproducts. And I'm pretty much out of control of the consequences. So where do I start? Go back to my story, go back to the interpretation, go back to my narrative, and we will look at practical tools how to do that. How do I deal with disappointment? What are some of the steps that I can take to deal with it? Step one, put yourself in a better mental state. And as I intimated with the previous slide, that the only way I can address my mental state is by addressing my thinking, addressing my thought patterns, addressing my story that I'm telling about the situation. And invariably, when I feel in a negative emotional state, it is because my internal representation, my narrative, my story is a long story filled with negative words and negative descriptions that in turn stimulate the release of a range of stress hormones that contribute towards my negative state. So I can start off by making the narrative more clinical, more factual, shorter, more to the point. And that in turn will reduce the amount of stress hormones and provide greater clarity for me to be able to think of possible solutions. Step two, attach yourself to your desire, not your goal. I wanted a relationship may have been the goal, and the relationship is not working out. Well, what is your desire in the relationship? I want to experience feelings of connection. I want to be able to spend time with people and enjoy their company and feel supported. So instead of focusing purely on having a relationship, focus on the emotional feelings that a relationship will evoke, what the desire is, what the experiences are that you want to evoke. And that very often relieves the pressure of pursuing a relationship, and very often focusing on the outcomes, focusing on the experience of the outcomes will contribute towards a whole range of processes that will ultimately bring about the ideal relationship. Step three, release yourself of your mental illusions. Mental illusions is the focusing on the outcomes, wanting things to go a certain way. There is the principle in goal setting that how the process comes about is none of my business, because I don't know what the bigger picture is. My business is what do I want and why do I want it? Yes, I want a relationship, but more than that, I don't want only the relationship. I want the whole experience that goes with the relationship. And that is the why. And if I focus on that, it creates a much better set of events and processes that will bring about the ultimate desired outcomes. Understand the outcome is not a setback. It is feedback. It shows me there are better ways to go about the process. There may be very important lessons I could learn from this particular outcome. And if I label the outcome as a disappointment, if I label the outcome as negative, that is how I will experience it. As opposed to I give the outcome a different meaning. What can I learn from this? What did I miss in the process? How can I refocus? How can I change my story to bring about that which I desire? Step five, focus on doing the best that you can. You've got certain skills, you've got certain tools, you've got certain abilities, and focus on that, as opposed to labeling yourself as unable or breaking yourself down. Focus on what it is you can do. Take those baby steps and develop from there. Very important principles. Some practical tools that we can use to address our feelings of disappointment. Reframe, and I've already spent a bit of time, change the story, make it more factual, make it shorter, reframe the story more towards a sense of hope, of my ability to get to my desired outcomes. So simply changing the story in a way that makes me at least feel less negative, and ultimately make me feel more positive. Healthy boundaries. Maybe I have a lack of boundaries that allowed people to walk all over me, people to take advantage of me. Maybe I'm taking on responsibility for things that are not my responsibility, that ultimately add more to my stress and contribute more towards feelings of disappointment. What is a boundary? A boundary is simply where I give myself permission to say yes and to say no on my terms, where I give myself permission as to what I will allow and what I will not allow on my terms. Establish those boundaries and communicate them. And it may be necessary for me to reinforce those boundaries. And ultimately, those boundaries will provide more of a sense of security for myself, in that I feel safer in where I'm at. There are certain things that I will no longer allow. And it also sends a message to others. And in the process, I may earn more respect from others as well, because of my healthy boundaries that I have established and that I've clearly communicated. Acceptance is not rolling over and playing dead. Acceptance is not settling for something that may not be ideal for me. Acceptance is simply, it is what it is. I give it permission to be. What I'm experiencing right now is an outcome, is an effect that is the result of a cause. Something created this. Therefore, I may even go as far as saying everything is perfect as it is. It cannot be any different. It cannot be any better, because it is an outcome. It is a result of a specific process. And when I get to the place of acceptance, I will experience a sense of peace and a sense of clarity, and I may now be able to create new causes, think differently, do things differently in order to create the result that I want. Compassion, first of all, compassion for myself, because very often we are the source of our own disappointment. We keep doing certain things, we keep making the same mistakes, we keep allowing certain things. So that feeling of compassion could be towards myself. I am human. I am bound to make mistakes because I'm in a process of growing. I'm in a process of learning. So I could be more compassionate and more forgiving towards myself. And from there, I can project it onto others, this feeling of compassion and forgiveness. People are human. People make mistakes. And if I could operate more from a place of compassion and forgiveness within my boundaries, within my acceptance, and continuing to reframe the story I tell myself, it will definitely change my experience and will lessen the feelings of disappointment. What is positive about disappointment? How could disappointment be a good thing? Because we've looked at the fact that disappointment very often go with feelings of anger, frustration, sometimes even resentment, sadness, insecurity. So how could I put a positive spin on disappointment? Well, three main points. The first one, disappointment means there is a passion for something. It's something that I really wanted. It's something that I really wanted to experience. And I can continue to feed that passion through taking personal responsibility and bringing about the necessary changes that will help me to achieve that particular outcome and realize and experience and fulfill my passion for whatever it may have been. Number two, disappointment means an opportunity for growth, because the only reason why I failed, in inverted commas, was because there was a better way of going about it. So I can learn more about myself, I can learn more about people, I can learn more about the specific principles according to which life operates. And the more I learn about those particular things, the more I grow, the more I develop, the stronger I become. Number three, my disappointment can make me stronger. How do I become stronger? By learning the lessons, by taking personal responsibility, by continuing to grow. And these 3 points may sound very cliche, but very often there's a lot of truth in cliches. And in particular, these 3 points, there's a lot of truth in them. So if I can reframe my story about my disappointment by including these 3 points, I will definitely create a very different experience for myself. I'll be able to give a whole different meaning to my perceived failures and disappointments. And as I said, create a whole different experience that will be able to help me to move forward and create more of what it is that I desire to experience. We're going to look at a short video that sort of provides a summary of what we've spoken about.
You expected more, expected better, and what you got was disappointment. So what now? This week we're off balance on purpose in Coronado, California. Two schools of thought: expect the best always, or brace yourself, life is full of disappointment. To which school do you belong? I think there's a third option: expect plenty of both, success and disappointment. Keep your head down, do the work, controlling what you can, and let go of what's out of your hands. Not easy, I know, but if you can manage it, you'll be less attached to either outcome. But big dreams require emotional investment, and unrealized leave a painful mark. When you are truly disappointed, and I've been there, there's still one move you have left: writing the story you tell yourself. You can proclaim how unfair the outcome is, you can beat yourself up for not doing more, or you can presume the best of yourself and others and reset to what's now and what's next. Here are 3 steps to reset from disappointment. Number 1, reflect. First, reflect on this immediate outcome. What are you proud of despite the result? Second, reflect upon past disappointments and how they've prepared or positioned you for other or better opportunities. Number 2, resolve. Does it still matter? Are you determined to continue? Can you build upon what happened with a new commitment? Number 3, rebound. Allow the sting of disappointment to become the kick of determination. Don't be beaten. Bounce. The school of life is not one of consistent victories or unending defeats, but it's a school that remains in session as long as you remain determined to learn.
A disappointment is a disappointment because I am calling it a disappointment. If I can review my understanding of disappointment, if I can re-look at disappointment from the perspective there are lessons that I've learned, I can change the story that I'm telling myself. I can learn, I can grow from that. And my disappointment potentially can set me up for even greater things, maybe different, but greater things. All those lessons that I've learned, all those experiences that I've labeled as disappointment, ultimately contribute towards putting me in a place to move towards a greater experience. That is the end of our presentation. Should you have any questions or queries, please feel free to direct these to me at john.ttklife@gmail.com. I'll be more than willing to endeavor to answer these questions, and it'll be great to communicate with you. I wish you an amazing ongoing journey of discovery and growth as you continue to find ways and means to design the life you desire and deserve.